Today we're going to be playing with Desmos and looking to see what polynomials look like with slightly different zeros. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to start off with, as you can see over here, I've got three different versions of very similar polynomials. And the first polynomial is just a polynomial that has third degree. There's x times the quantity x minus 1 times the quantity x minus 2. And this is the factored form of this polynomial. And so the zeros are going to happen at 0, at 1, and at 2, which you can see right here. Here's the 0 at 0, here's the 0 at 1, and here's the 0 at 2. And because this is a third degree, it's basically got, if you multiply this out, you'll get x cubed. We end up with this shape that comes up from the third quadrant and then bops up into the first quadrant. So it's this lovely cubic form that we kind of are already familiar with. And so what I wanted to look at is what happens if we square one of these factors. So this is actually no longer a cubic. The second one is going to be x times x minus 1, the quantity squared, times x minus 2. And let's look at what happens at x equals 1. And in fact, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to do a close-up of what's going on right there. So let me turn that on, and that'll be the green one. And you'll notice we get into that W shape. And the reason we have the W shape, this swooping down, swooping up a little bit, and then swooping back up, is because this is now x times x minus 1 times x minus 1 times x minus 2. This is an x to the fourth. And so this is going to look more like, well, in my mind, it kind of looks like a parabola that gets a little wiggly, gets a little funky here in the middle, but basically it's like a parabola. So it goes up to the left and it goes up to the right. So that end behavior is going to be that it's positive at both ends. But let's look at what happens at x minus 1. So at x equals 1, instead of the red one, which comes through looking like that, at x equals 1, notice that it doesn't come through. So the polynomial comes up, it touches the x-axis, and then it comes back down before then coming back up at x equals 2. And what do I mean by that? Well, notice that the red one comes through at x equals 1 and becomes negative. So this one actually stays negative pretty much the whole time except right there at x equals 1. So how would we know that x minus 1 is squared? And the answer is, if you see a 0 that looks like this, where it's like a touch and go, it doesn't go like the red one all the way through. If it just comes up to an axis and then comes back down, or if it does it from the other direction, comes down and goes back up. So if it doesn't cross the x-axis, then you've probably got something squared. And just to make it exciting, I thought I would look at cubed. Ooh. Now notice that I'm going to turn off the green because it does make it a little bit complicated. Now this is the purple one. Do you see all of the zeros? And the answer is yes. X equals 0 is a 0. X equals 1 is also a 0. And x equals 2 also a 0. But look at what happens at 1. Do you see how flat it gets? So instead of coming through like these two at 0 and at 2, that they just go right through, this one gets kind of really close and squishy, close to the x-axis. And that's a sign that we've got a cubic. And as you might imagine, if I were to just keep going, and if I went and looked at what happens when we've got an x minus 1 to the fourth, it gets even flatter right around that 0 of 1, 0. So you know you've got a higher exponent, a higher power, when the graph gets really flat. And again, let me go back just to the plane and the one that's just a little bit sprinkles. So the x minus 1, the quantity squared, you can see that happening because it does not cross all the way through the axis. It comes up, touches, and then comes back down. So how do you know you've got a 0 or a root with multiplicity greater than 1, like multiplicity 2, multiplicity 3, multiplicity 4? You know that because it flattens out, and then it does something different. In this case, x minus 1, the quantity squared, means that this comes up and does that touch, and then go. It goes back down. So it does not cross completely the way that the original polynomial did. Okay, hopefully that helped. Woohoo! Good luck. Math on. You're amazing. Woohoo.